Being able to change and adapt is how we survive as individuals. And by taking that over a period of time, we find that that also played a component in what created the massive amount of different cultures around the world. From the tribes of India, South America, and Africa, to all the different components of culture within Europe and all those different countries, to all the cultural differences in the United States from state to state and from city to country. Every facet of culture is developed from how we learn to survive over time. What we learned is the best way to somehow live over time. And as we look at culture today, every single facet and trait and part of it, there are a lot of parts that no longer serve us. There's a lot of parts that at first had a positive intent when it's created, but over time, with how life changes, it no longer does a positive benefit to what we want to do, what we want to accomplish. There's cultures within companies that today promote stress and overwhelm. There's cultures within our families that promote judgment and vilification of one another. And there's cultures within society or country that promote hate and violence and just general agitation and a barrier between communication between each other. So to be able to create a better world, from anywhere from society to within our own home, we need to understand culture and how to change it. But the question really becomes, what really is culture? What are the components within? What does it represent? Can we even change culture? And if we can, what does the process look like? How do we do that? All right, to start off this conversation, let's start at the beginning. Let's start at its foundation. What is culture? Culture is a set of collective ideas behind social behavior, to put it simply. It's essentially the unwritten rules, or maybe even written rules, behind what you can and can't say, behind what you can or can't do, what you should or shouldn't do, behind what you should or shouldn't wear or think or believe. And that's believing. That's actually what it really is at its foundation. Culture is a collective set of beliefs about what you should do, how you should live. And when I say live in this context, I'm saying should live as in living in alignment with the other people in that culture, with the standards and practices of that culture. So, all right, that's culture. So why should we care so much about learning how to change culture? Well, kind of like what I alluded to earlier. A lot of times with cultures, they have some way of interacting, some practice that back when it was created benefited us in some way. But now, today, it might no longer serve us. So for an example, the tribal mindset. Long ago, thousands of years ago, we were in individual tribes, right? Humanity. And it was dangerous to interact with somebody else from another tribe. Why? Well, because they could be hostile. They could see you and go, hey, that's somebody to take something from. They can go and try to take your stuff, bite you for what you have. So it was dangerous even to start that communication, to start that conversation. But today, that thought process, that mindset no longer serves us. In fact, let me use an example. Think about, let's just say that you're laid off from your job. No, bad things happen, you're laid off from your job. Now you need a job. Now, the society today, the more people you know, the more likely you know somebody who knows about an open position in their company. So the more likely that maybe you'll get that job. And by getting that job, now you can secure the finances to take care of yourself and your family. So by knowing more people, not just within your tribe, but beyond it, you're more likely to be able to have those opportunities you need to be better capable of surviving. So the old tribal mindset no longer serves us. And that's essentially why we need to learn how to change culture. If you want to change your company culture to be more empowering and inspired, if you want to change your family culture to be more accepting and loving, if you want to change the culture within society or your country to be more accepting of who you see yourself as who your race, your religion, whatever it might be. If you want to create this change, you need to understand how to create cultural change and the various facets within that process. All right, let me use an example from my own experience to kind of teach you or show you where my experience comes from as far as creating positive cultural change. So I have a background in engineering. And when I graduated with my bachelor's, I ended up moving up to Ohio and worked for the Air Force as an engineer. The organization I worked in was, to put it lightly, very mission focused. They were so mission, 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 get it done, get it done, get it done. And they were less focused on actually taking care of their people. The Air Force itself has these programs, these initiatives to take care of people in general, because especially with active duty military, there's a huge challenge with keeping everybody mentally healthy, for example. But those programs, or at least what I found, were largely ineffective. So I wanted to do something to make a positive impact on this organization, because that's who I am. And just to frame it here, the reason I became an engineer is not because I wanted to be an engineer forever. It's because I wanted that skill set to be able to solve the most complex problems the world has to offer and find solutions for them. And what I did is I took that skill set and used it for another application. I took that engineering mindset and used it for people, human behavior, cultural interactions, and how do we improve ourselves? How do we improve our life and the world around us? What I did was I ended up creating a program as a side duty while I did my engineering work to start making that positive influence, that positive difference in the organization. And at first, what I did is I thought, all right, so how do you really start anything? You teach somebody about it. You talk to somebody about it, right? Started teaching the concepts behind mindfulness, behind gratitude, behind influence, these concepts behind how to thrive as an individual. And hopefully by doing that, it will plant a seed in people to make them start thinking, how can I use that in my life? Where in my life do I need to improve? Where do I need to grow? How can I become healthier and really happier? And not just maybe in my personal life, but in the workplace as well. By talking and teaching these concepts, it was planting seeds of people reflecting upon themselves and how to improve. You started seeing a positive change in kind of the vibe. People, at first, there was a lot of obstacles in the way. Let me tell you, especially with the organization I was working in, it's about half active duty military and half civilian. There was a lot of resistance towards taking care of people, surprisingly enough. But what we found was purely by teaching these concepts, people were kind of more open to thinking about it, reflecting on it, a little more open to being open to change. And what ended up happening was one of my higher ups, if you will, the squadron commander said, hey, I like what you're doing. How about I 10x you to make a greater impact? So I ended up leading a team of 10 people to actually create this positive cultural impact in this organization, in this part of the organization, roughly about 300 people. Probably should mention, there's a squadron, and a squadron is composed of different flights or offices, and there's 10 of them in this certain squadron. So we had one representative in each of those offices. And the thing about it, one of the coolest things about it was the culture of the squadron was really the collective culture of all the different offices, all the microcultures of these people do this thing, they have this environment of people they talk to, this is how they interact. Oh, but over here, same squadron, but different office, different flight, they're interacting in another way based off of who's in the office. No, the influences and people they interact with on a daily basis, and all these different components. To change this culture as a whole squadron, you had to address all the 10 different microcultures within it. So it was kind of a cool little process. And what we found with the various practices and strategies that we use, that I'm going to teach you here in a minute, is that we were able to get a positive change in culture. People were more open to thinking about their own health and wellness. People were more open to talking to somebody else about, hey, how you doing? You look like you're struggling today. Now you want to talk? You want to have a conversation about it? People were more open to talking and having those conversations, more open to supporting each other. And it was really a fascinating experience about, hey, what can you actually do to have this positive change in culture? And especially with an organization to where there's a lot of resistance to change, and I'll talk about a little bit about the obstacles here in a minute, it was quite the process to say the least. You're probably curious, like, all right, you actually changed this culture in a positive way. And it wasn't society, it was 300 people in the squadron, but at the same time, that's something. All right, let's take the lessons there and apply them to wherever I want to change. Again, in my work, in my family, wherever it might be. And as far as the obstacles we found in the way, there were a few that stood out to be the most significant, to say the least. One of them in particular that was the most challenging was the people who were in the environment for a long time. When somebody is in an environment for a long time, we have certain habits, certain expectations on how to interact with the world around us in that culture, how things work. And neurologically, the brain is wired to follow habits. Why? Because the brain is an energy saving machine. It is always looking for ways to conserve energy in case it needs to use it somewhere else to survive. And when you take that into a person, into an organization, then that person acts as a point of resistance to the change. Why? Because by things changing, the brain goes, what's going on? I don't like this. I'm not used to this. Let's not do this. And it's not necessarily that they're just old and disgruntled or whatnot. It's human psychology that gets in the way. And there's ways to address that. But the people in the way often openly going, why are we doing this? I don't get, no. The old way worked. I still got the mission done. Why do we have to go through all these changes, right? There's a lot of often open objections to the idea of changing in the first place. Why do we have, even if it's taking care of people, there's still open objections. And if not open objections, people just weren't involved. They weren't engaged in the conversations and the activities and all that kind of stuff. So that was the first obstacle, the people. The second is the inflexibility of the organization, especially with organizations that are highly structured and old organizations that have been around a while, military. It is hard to start guiding thought and focus in a new direction, perhaps away from mission a little bit and more towards taking care of your people. Even if statistically it is shown that when you take care of your people, they are more productive, more engaged, which leads to better outcomes mission-wise, still making that change is challenging because there is a resistance to any change. Again, it's neurological, especially with big organizations to where we've done this for so long, we're still surviving and thriving. As long as we keep doing this, we'll still be successful. But again, it's at our foundation to survive. We must be able to adapt. And if we're unable to adapt, then bad things usually happen, right? Just natural selection at its finest. So the inflexibility of the organization itself played a huge factor. And the third really biggest thing was really it's a concept. There are two ways to create change. The first is addition. The second is subtraction. A lot of times, especially with trying to remove something, there is an enormous resistance to change. It is foundationally built within our human needs. We have certain ways of fulfilling our needs. And by removing something we do, even if it's self-destructive, if that then results in a human need not being met, our brain's going to go, what the heck is going on? I need to fill this need. And it's going to look for the first thing it knows to fill that need, which oftentimes is the old bad habit. And so that's why it's so hard to, let's say, stop smoking. A lot of times people stop smoking and they just stop that, but they never replace the fulfillment of that need with something more empowering. So what happens, they're trying, doesn't work, that need's unfulfilled, the brain is freaking out, goes to the first thing it knows to fulfill that need, so they start smoking again. And again, taking that personal human psychology, it also affects organizations. The easier way to go about it is by addition, by adding something to the culture, to the environment, to the practices that leads to be more empowering. And by first adding something that could fulfill that need, then it's easier to subtract things that could, let's say, not fulfill the need, that does not benefit you. All right, one last facet, one last little tidbit before we dive into the 6 components of creating cultural change, positive cultural change. And that one component is the 3.5% rule. And what you'll find is you don't need to reach 100% of people in order to make positive cultural change. All you need to do is get 3.5% of the culture actively aligned with you, and you'll create the change. And this rule came out of studies and research from protests, let's say in the Philippines in 1986, to the Rose Revolution in Georgia in 2003, to where 3.5% of the population was actively involved in this protest and doing some demonstration that says, hey, changes are needed to be made. And then what happened? Changes were made. Every single time at least 3.5% of the population was involved, changes were always made. So you don't need 100% of people, you just need 3.5%. Now, let's get into the 6 components of cultural change. Number 1, you need a need for change. You need a compelling purpose behind this is why change needs to be made. You need something for people to buy into. You need something that is so compelling that people realize it's worth the effort of changing. Because changing is hard. Going and creating a new habit is hard. It's diving into that psychology again. So people need to know it's worth it. And people need to know not just that it's worth it, but it needs to happen now. Secondly, you need compelling evidence that ideally proves that this need is actually a need. You need statistics, you need studies if you can get them. You need some sort of foundational evidence to show that what you're saying is a real problem, is something that truly does need a solution. And not only that, evidence that shows the 2 foundational needs of really any change. And this is one of the most important things I can teach you here. The 2 foundational needs for any change. You need to have 1, a compelling future, something positive that will come out of making the change, something that people can be drawn towards. And at the same time, you need something that pushes people in the forward direction. You need something that says, hey, if we don't change, these negative things will happen. These negative things will happen. So they'll be pushed away here and pulled to this positive, compelling future. And the thing about it is most times people just said, hey, it'll be a better future, it'll be a better future. Our brains are wired more powerfully to avoid the bad than to gain the good. So to gain the good, which again needs something, a compelling future, you also need to accept and acknowledge that if you don't change, the bad will happen too. Right? So you need both components to it. And then component 3 is you need to have absolute certainty in what you're saying. You need to be absolutely confident that this is a need, this needs to change. And it's all about the attitude and the belief and the absolute unwillingness to waver in your pursuit of making this change. People listen, people hear what you say, but they feel your attitude. You need to have the attitude behind this is a need, this needs to happen. And that attitude is what inspires people to follow you. If as a leader you want people to follow you in this effort, you need to have unwavering confidence and power behind your just fact and knowledge of this needs to change. To create change, you must have other people believe it needs to happen, believe in the change, not just logically, but emotionally as well. There's the emotional component that needs to happen if you truly want people to follow you. If you truly want people to help you create this change, you need to be absolutely certain. So then you have component 4. You need a plan of action. You need something that says, here's where we are now, and here's where we're going to go. And here's how we get there. And the most important component of this is having a clear and compelling vision for the end result. You have to know what actually it's going to look like at the very end. It's like saying, I want to create a piece of art, and then just throwing stuff on the sheet. You can turn into anything. You have no idea what's going to happen. But if you're going, no, I want a mountain scene with these colors, this kind of vibe. I want to have a donkey on that mountain carrying a shark on its back, whatever it might be. Once you have a clear and compelling vision, you can actually create it. But if you don't have that clear and compelling vision, if you just want to do something, who knows what's going to happen? To actually effectively create change, you have to have a clear vision for what it's going to look like. You have to clearly say, this is the end result that we are going to achieve. And only then can you create the plan to get from where you are now to where you want to go. And so many times people don't have that plan, but if you don't have a plan, what are you going to do? Even if you convince people, well, not convince, but even if you share your beliefs and people say, yes, this is a problem, let's find a solution, let's get it done. If you don't have a plan, what are you going to do? Sit around thinking, what should we do? Pretty much. You need a plan to make it happen. So that's component number 4. Number 5, so important, is you need consistency. Earlier, I alluded to the old, what I like to call crusty kernels. The people are like, this is the way it's always been. It has to stay this way. This, that, the other. I don't like change. Through consistency, people will start to believe in what you're doing. Because so many times programs come up, they try to change something, and then they disappear after they didn't work. come up, try to change something, and they disappear. By continuously taking action, by continuously showing people that we are here, this is a problem, we're finding a solution, this is going to happen, people start to buy in to your commitment, to your dedication, to your work ethic. Nothing is more compelling as far as a leader than a very strong work ethic. And that is shown through consistency. So you need active consistency in your actions and following that plan to start to get people to buy into what you're doing. Because again, only through consistency can you create, one, commitment, but two, active long-term change. And then finally, component number 6, you need to understand the obstacles in the way. A lot of times we want to get from point A to B, and we're like, yeah, this is the ideal path, let's follow it. But then people are like, wait a minute, there's a mountain in the way. We can't drive through a mountain, so what is going to happen? Oh, we got to go this other direction. Cool. Oh, wait, well, this direction takes us to a lake. We can't get around that lake, so maybe this other direction is the better way to go. You need to understand the obstacles in the way so the plan you make can actually most efficiently get you to where you want to go. And again, the greatest obstacle here is human psychology. How do you address those facets and obstacles in the way? And again, that consistency component number 5 is a huge component in that. But there's one facet of human psychology, but there's another facet of structure of laws, of, if you're in an organization, structure of how the organization is currently built and what kind of changes need to be made to get where you want to go. There's often multiple layers, multiple people you need to talk to, a lot of stuff that needs to happen. And in each one of those components, there's obstacles in the way. Identify the obstacles and you can plan around them. You can plan for them and you can overcome them. And one thing here I really, really want to emphasize is you don't need to be perfect right off the bat. You don't have to have a perfect plan right off the bat. The plan itself is a guide on where to go, is a way to take steps and actions in the right direction. But there's always, I mentioned the obstacles, there's always going to be obstacles that popped up that you didn't realize before, that you couldn't have planned for before. And you can't get there until you start moving. So don't worry about being perfect right off the bat. Don't worry about spending years of research before you even take the first step. Because in reality, a lot of the change on how to actually make it happen is found and realized while you're moving, not while you're planning. So I really want to focus in on this here, is those 6 components. You don't have to have them all crystal clear at the very beginning. You can just figure it out along the way. And I'm not just saying that go blindly into it, sprinting, hope for the best. No, plan a little bit. No, do what you can beforehand, but don't have to make it perfect, because perfection is really the enemy of getting things done. Because at the foundation, what is perfection? Perfection is trying to make something so perfect that when it gets out there, it could not possibly be taken in a negative way. It could not possibly come back to you negatively because you made sure it was perfect. You could not possibly have a mistake that could reflect negatively on you. But the thing about it is that is the entire idea behind change, right? Is that if things were perfect, there would be no need for change. And the process of changing itself is addressing the imperfections of the structure, of the culture, whatever it is. It is a process that embraces the imperfections of the world, the imperfections in ourselves. And as long as we continue to learn from them and move through them, we can create the change we want. So don't worry about being perfect. Just make a plan, have a foundation, and take the first step, and you'll figure it out along the way, as long as you have that will and belief to do so. And on that point, the most important thing on your end, I just straight up did a 90 degree, most important thing on your end to do to make sure that even if challenges come in your way, you'll be able to overpower them, is foundationally have a powerful and unwavering belief that you can make the change. It all comes down to your belief that you can do it. Because if your belief says, I might be able to do it, you go in, and then once the first challenge comes on, you're like, yeah, I tried, then you go back. Nothing happens. You need to say, no, I believe I can and will make this happen. And the stronger that belief, the more challenges you can overcome. So start with a powerful belief, and you can do it. Believe in yourself. It always comes down to that. Belief is the foundation of every human action. Master that, and you master yourself, and you master your ability to create change. Hey, as always, my friend, thank you for watching. Feel free to reach out, or if you will, subscribe and comment down below. What cultural change, either in society, in your organization, or maybe even your home, needs to happen? What do you think? Thank you for watching, my friends, and I'll see you next time.